Hello guys, so you people were requesting me to give the video explanation of your topic wise test. So I have tried to compile these video explanations in two parts. In the first part you will be getting questions 1 to 25, and in the second subsequent part you will be getting the questions from 26 to 50. Okay, so let's get started. Look at the question number 1 here. 18 years girl who was using spectacles for the last 10 years came with a history of photopsia and sudden loss of vision in the right eye. Which one of the following clinical examinations should be performed to clinch the diagnosis? Now, in order to understand that what clinical examination you should do in order to clinch the diagnosis, you should know what is your provisional diagnosis. So in this question, if you look at this patient who is a 18 years girl and she is using spectacles for the last 10 years. Now she is wearing spectacles, that means she is having some refractive error. She is having some refractive error. And what is the most common refractive error in this age? That is the myopia. So if I consider this to be myopia, she is using spectacles for the last 10 years, maybe for the myopia minus glasses she is wearing. Now she has come up with a history of photopsia and the sudden loss of vision. That means there was some pathological refractive error. So that can be your high myopia. That means this patient was having high myopia. This high myopia is also called as pathological myopia or degenerative myopia So this patient is having high myopia or the pathological variety of myopia which causes degenerative changes. So this question is based on the complications of the high myopia. What is the most common complication? The most common complication of this myopia is actually the rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, right? Now, do this rhegmatogenous retinal detachment come up with the photopsia and the sudden loss of vision? Yes. What is the most common symptoms with which the patient present if he is having RRD? You know that this patient will come up with the sudden painless diminution of vision, and two things are very unique, that is your photopsia. We have photopsia and floaters, which are very unique to this RD. So we can take that this patient was having a high myopia who has now developed rhegmatogenous retinal detachment and therefore presenting with the sudden loss of vision and the photopsia. Photopsia means the flashes of light. So now look at the options. Which of the clinical examinations? They are not asking you investigation. Now this is again an important thing. You have to see what particular thing they are asking. They are not asking you the investigation. They are asking you which of the following clinical examinations should be performed in order to clinch the diagnosis. Option number A is cycloplegic refraction, indirect ophthalmoscopy, Schiot's tonometry or gonioscopy. So cycloplegic refraction, this is not required. You have to diagnose the RRD. Refraction has already been done and she was a known case of refractive error. Indirect ophthalmoscopy will come back. Schiot's tonometry. So this is done actually for taking the intraocular pressure. So that is required if you are suspecting the glaucoma. So that is also not required. Gonioscopy. Gonioscopy is done to see the angle of anterior chamber. So this is done when we are suspecting the angle closure glaucoma. So this is also not required. So answer to this question is indirect ophthalmoscopy. We require the indirect ophthalmoscopy. By doing that, you are able to see a large area of the retina, that is your 8 disc diameter. You are able to see if there is some detachment of the retina. You will also be able to see the extent of the retina, right? Then you will also be able to see the retinal hole or the retinal tear. You know that mostly it is the retinal tear which is responsible for the rhegmatogenous RD, and according to the Linkoff rule, according to the Linkoff rule, if you are getting the highest raised area in the retinal detachment, then within 1 to 1.5 clock hours you will get this retinal tear. This is 98 to 99% of the cases. According to the Linkoff rule, you will get the retinal tear within the highest convexity of your detachment. So that is the reason that even before you are doing the retinal surgery, we do the indirect ophthalmoscopy to find that retinal tear. Because when do we treat this rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, the first thing that you do is sealing that hole, sealing the retinal hole. So sealing of the retinal hole, it is very important that you know where do you have that retinal hole. So answer to this question is indirect ophthalmoscopy. Alright. Now coming to question number 2. Now here we have a patient with clinically significant macular edema. So they are already, telling you the diagnosis that this patient is having clinically significant macular edema, diabetic macular edema with non-progressive diabetic retinopathy, and this was treated. Now because this patient was having the macular edema, maculopathy was there, so it was treated with the macular grid photocoagulation. That is all right. The patient still has vitreomacular traction. So what is the preferred treatment? So here you are having a patient who was having the diabetic retinopathy. You know the stages already. We have got like NPDR, then we have got PDR, then we have got the diabetic maculopathy, then we have got the end stage disease, right? So this patient is in the stage of diabetic maculopathy and he is having clinically significant macular edema. Now in which stage he is, whether it is NPDR or PDR, you have to see this. The patient is having this non-progressive kind of diabetic retinopathy and still has vitreomacular traction. That means previously also there was a vitreoretinal traction. Now traction is occurring due to the dense vitreous hemorrhage. The traction occurs due to the dense vitreous hemorrhage. That means patient has been in the stage of PDR. In the PDR you have neovascularization and then you have the vitreous hemorrhage, and PDR always occur after NPDR. So he has already crossed NPDR, PDR, and now he is in the stage of diabetic maculopathy where he is having clinically significant macular edema, and they also say that he is having the macular traction. Now if this still there is a macular traction, he might go to this stage and this macular traction can lead to the tractional RD. There is a high chance that this patient can have tractional RD because he has been moving from NPDR to PDR to diabetic maculopathy, clinically significant macular edema, and after giving the treatment he still has the vitreoretinal traction. Now what is the preferred treatment? So let's see the options. Intravitreal bevacizumab, pars plana vitrectomy, repeat this macular grid photocoagulation, or augmented macular photocoagulation. Now this patient has macular traction. Macular traction may photocoagulation will not be helpful. Traction is there. That means we have dense fibrous bands present in the vitreous cavity. So I don't require the photocoagulation. Photocoagulation is required at the stage of neovascularization to stop the vessels from bleeding. So I don't have the active vessels bleeding here. So obviously photocoagulation not required. Now intravitreal bevacizumab. This is a anti-VEGF agent. It is a anti-VEGF agent, and this again is required to arrest the angiogenesis to stop the neovascularization. So that is also not required because now it has crossed that stage and traction is shown. So your answer becomes pars plana vitrectomy. See, I will tell you directly also why the pars plana vitrectomy is required, but I always follow this approach for solving the MCQs because at your level there may be some of the options in the questions that you are not very much familiar. That does not mean that you keep on adding the new things in your notebooks, that you should know this also. You should learn the art or the skill of solving questions from the available knowledge that you have. So most of the times you have that knowledge, okay, from which you can solve this question, and you don't have to add up the new things, because next time the question will come, you don't know what new information they will give. So you should learn how to solve the question from the available knowledge. Okay, now the direct one. So this is the extra information that if you like you can add up. What are the indications of the pars plana vitrectomy? So if you are having a patient of diabetic retinopathy and he is showing you complications, what are the indications of this pars plana vitrectomy? The first is if there is a very dense vitreous hemorrhage. If there is less vitreous hemorrhage, if there is a fresh vitreous hemorrhage, then we can do the photocoagulation, we can give the anti-VEGF agents to stop them bleed. But if it's a very unclearing kind, a resistant type, dense type of vitreous hemorrhage, I will have to do the vitrectomy. Point number 2, if there is already TRD, tractional retinal detachment, you have so much of fibrovascular tissue which is enough to give the traction and pull the retina towards itself, especially if there is macular involvement also. Point number 3, if you have tractional RD along with the RRD also, then there is no other chance, you have to do the pars plana vitrectomy. And here the question they have given is similar like this. If you have the diffuse diabetic macular edema, if you have the diffuse macular edema, so this is your diffuse diabetic macular edema. So if you have that diffuse diabetic macular edema, along with this you have the posterior hyaloid traction along with the ERM. ERM means we have the epiretinal membrane, and also we have a epiretinal membrane. Then in this case also you are required to do the pars plana vitrectomy. Alright, now coming to the question number 3. We have a young patient, young male, who is presenting with central scotoma in the left eye, okay, while the right eye is showing 6/6 vision. So there is a young male who is having unilateral central scotoma, other eye normal. Now on examination in the left eye, which was having the central scotoma, there was a focal foveal detachment. So this young male is having the foveal detachment. So foveal detachment means there is a macular detachment. That means this patient is having the macular detachment. So let's see what they are asking. They are asking what should be your next step. A person is coming with the central scotoma. That means there is a central diminution of vision. Central diminution of vision also means that this patient has some macular pathology. On examination there is foveal detachment, so there is again macular detachment. So what are you suspecting? So that means macular detachment could be due to CSR. What is CSR actually? It is a central serous retinopathy where we have the spontaneous detachment of the neurosensory retina. If there is a spontaneous detachment of neurosensory retina from the RPE in the macular area, there is a detachment, that is called as central serous retinopathy. So if there is a detachment of this neurosensory retina from the RPE layer in just the macular area, that is called as CSR. Now what are the risk factors? This condition is more common in males 20 to 50 years of age. So if I say 20 years, that would be a young age, okay. Then stress, then smoking, and then is the steroids. 3S. I always teach this you in class. There are 3S which are responsible for the CSR, high risk factors: stress, smoking, steroids, right? And that's why I told you that a business executive, these people are highly prone to this CSR, because you know they have always target pressures, stress is always there, exuberant lifestyles are there, and if any patient is on the steroid. So these are the risk factors. So you have to ask about the risk factors from this patient. So they are asking what should be the next step. Should you do the laser photocoagulation? No, I won't do the photocoagulation, because you know that CSR is a self-limiting condition. Spontaneous resolution occurs in about 4 to 12 weeks, 1 to 3 months may we are having the spontaneous resolution. Ask for the history of trauma. No, trauma does not cause the CSR. Inquire about the use of steroids. Yes, steroids can precipitate the central serous retinopathy. Examine the retrolental cells. No, we won't get the retrolental cells here. So we have to ask if you have taken any steroids, smoking history. Then you should ask about the business history. You will know about the amount of stress is there or not. Then you can ask about the previous history, if there was any previous attack, because recurrent attacks are also common in cases of CSR. All right. Now coming to question number 4. A 70-year man is there who is presenting with deterioration of vision 3 weeks after the cataract extraction and the IOL implantation. So simply, you know, they are talking about the post-operative period. There is a diminution of vision after the cataract surgery. Slit lamp shows honeycomb maculopathy. Also FFA shows the flower petal hyperfluorescence. I think this is the simplest question because they have given you every clue. So this male is having the post-operative complication, right? This patient is having post-operative complication, and that this is occurring 3 weeks. So most probably towards the late, because early complications are usually occurring. Although we do take the period up to the 3 weeks, but usually they are less than 7 days, or early May it is less than 7 days, especially, you know, within 48 to 72 hours it is occurring. So if I am saying 3 weeks, so it is going towards the late period. And moreover, the two findings, the honeycomb maculopathy, this we get in the cystoid macular edema. Flower petal appearance, again we get in the cystoid macular edema, and cystoid macular edema is the late post-operative complication of the cataract surgery. Now look at the options. Age related macular degeneration, not related to the cataract surgery. Central serous retinopathy, you have just seen, it was a spontaneous detachment related to stress, smoking and steroids. Macular dystrophy, you are not relating with the cataract surgery. Macular dystrophy are of two types. One is your Best disease, or the second is the Stargardt disease. The Stargardt disease, and you know, these are occurring in young age or in children. Like Best disease is more common in the infants and the children, while the Stargardt disease is common in the young age. So again, this is not related to the cataract surgery. So answer to this question is cystoid macular edema. You have got the findings suggestive of cystoid macular edema, and moreover it is also a well-known late post-operative complication of the cataract surgery, and here it will be called as the Irwin-Gass syndrome. So it has a typical name. Irwin-Gass syndrome is the cystoid macular edema which is occurring in the pseudophakic patient after the cataract surgery, right? Next question, question number 5. Here we have a 7-year-old patient who is presenting with the left exo. Exo means that you have a divergent squint. You have a divergent squint in the patient. Okay, left may we have a divergent squint, right may there is normal fundus, normal vision. Left eye has a very less vision, that is just hand movements. Along with this, you have subretinal yellow exudates and retinal detachment, and telangiectatic vessels are also there. So what is the diagnosis? See, this is actually a boy. I think that is missing here. 7 years boy is there, male patient, right, who is having unilateral diminution of vision. Along with this, you have yellow exudates. So lot of exudates are there. Okay. Then we have retinal detachment, and then you have the telangiectasia. Telangiectasia is also present here. So this is actually clear-cut case of the Coats disease. This is the Coats disease, which is coming under the DD of the leukocoria. It is one of the important DDs of the leukocoria. It's a unilateral condition which is common in the boys, okay, and less than 10 years mein this is very common. And basically what you are getting in the Coats disease is the idiopathic vascular telangiectasia. You have the telangiectasia of the vessels, you have abnormal formation of the vessels. Now due to this telangiectasia, we have lot of inflammation, and this lot of inflammation will lead to lot of exudates, and lot of exudates is responsible for this leukocoria also. Exudates are responsible for exudative retinal detachment also. Exudates are also responsible for the secondary glaucoma. Okay, so everything given in the question is being explained by this Coats disease. Sympathetic ophthalmia is occurring due to the trauma. So this is not the answer. ROP, retinopathy of prematurity. This is common in the premature infants, not at 7 years of age. So this is not there. The RD, there also you get, but this is the tractional retinal detachment. Then familial exudative vitreoretinopathy. So familial will not show this your telangiectatic vessel. So this is also not the answer. Answer to this question is the Coats disease. Now one thing again I want to tell you that why this patient is having exotropia. So I told you in the squint also, whenever you are using one eye constantly, the other eye always going into amblyopia. So right eye was normal, okay, so left eye there was a diminution of vision due to the Coats disease. So what is happening? The unused eye mostly goes in the divergent squint. This is common in cases of the watch repairers, those who are using the uniocular microscope. So all these people have more frequently the divergent squint. Okay. Next question, question number 6. Here we have a 30-year-old patient who is having recurrent headache. So normally you do not expect to have recurrent headache in a 30-year patient, but this patient is having, and therefore fundus was advised. He was found to have generalized arteriolar attenuation with the multiple cotton wool spots, flame-shaped hemorrhages in both the eyes. What is the most likely cause? Now even before you look at the options, can you see you have history of recurrent headache, okay, you have attenuation, that is angiosperm is there. And angiosperm is the characteristic sign that you get in cases of hypertension, right? Hypertension can lead to headache also, and there are two important features that you get in hypertension retinopathy. What are these two important features? The cotton wool spots and the flame-shaped hemorrhages. Flame-shaped hemorrhages are actually the superficial hemorrhages. These are the superficial hemorrhages, while the cotton wool spots are actually the soft exudates. These are actually the soft exudates, and both of them are present in the nerve fiber layer of the retina. So now look at the options. Diabetic retinopathy. Now diabetic retinopathy, there is no history of diabetes. Diabetic retinopathy mein non-insulin dependent is more common. That is not common before 40 to 50 years of age. You do not have microaneurysms here. Rather you have angiosperm. If it is a case of diabetic retinopathy, you will be getting the microaneurysm. So it is not diabetic retinopathy. Yes, it is a case of hypertension retinopathy. You are getting all signs of hypertension retinopathy here. CRAO. CRAO is again common in a patient who is more than 50 years of age. It is common in males. You will get the cherry red spot there, pale retina there. You will get lot of exudates in the other layers in the periphery of the retina, due to which you get the yellowish white or milky white retina, but the fovea continues to look red because choriocapillaries are shining through it. That is why you get the cherry red spot. Temporal arteritis is not there. So this is a case of hypertension retinopathy. Question number 7 now. The 5-year boy is presenting with leukocoria in the right eye, which is diagnosed as retinoblastoma. So they have already told you that this 5 years boy is having the retinoblastoma. There's a leukocoria in the right eye, and what is the amount of retinoblastoma? Entire globe. Examination of the left eye. The left eye also shows a small tumor 2 to 3 mm in the periphery. What is the ideal management? So if you remember, I told you that whenever it is less than 3 mm, then we can give the focal therapy. We can give the focal therapy if it was less than 3 mm, but here the picture is that one eye is less than 3 mm, so there I can give the focal therapy, but the other eye is involving a large tumor diffuse. So obviously for this entire globe I have to do the enucleation. For this I will do the enucleation, and for this 2 to 3 mm I will give the focal therapy, right? So that means the right eye I should give the enucleation, and for the left eye I should give the focal therapy. So this option C is correct. Answer should be enucleation of the right eye and the focal therapy of the left eye, because I cannot do observation for less than. Observation we are not doing for retinoblastoma. That is a tumor and not something which has to be observed. So what are the general guidelines? See, whenever you have bilateral. Now some of the students gave me this message that why it's not chemotherapy. So you have to do chemotherapy, but for this there are certain guidelines. See, if it is a case of bilateral retinoblastoma, then there are two possibilities. One is that you have a large tumor in one eye and the other eye is having some other thing, okay, and the other option is that you have a diffuse full globe like the one which is given in this option. So if you are having a large tumor means you can consider it to be more than 10 mm. Okay, so large means if it is more than 10 mm with in one eye and other eye is normal, then you can simply go for the enucleation of that eye in which you are having a large tumor. But if you are having a large tumor in one eye and other eye is also showing a small tumor, then what you can do, then you can go for the chemotherapy for the large tumor and do the focal therapy for the small tumor. But in this scenario we had been given a diffuse tumor, so you are having a full globe tumor in the one eye. Now here also if I have a normal fellow eye, then I could have gone for the enucleation and other eye observation, but I do not have the other eye normal. I have a small tumor in the fellow eye. This is given in the question. So what can I do? I can go for the enucleation for this diffuse tumor, and because of that small tumor given in the other eye, I have to do the focal therapy. So whenever you have normal fellow eye, you can do just the enucleation, but if you have the large tumor, go with the chemotherapy. Okay, and other eye focal therapy. If you have a diffuse tumor, then you have to do the enucleation for the large tumor and the focal therapy for this. So this you have to always keep in mind. Okay, let us see once more. Bilateral retinoblastoma. So either you have a large tumor in one eye, okay, with a small tumor in other eye, or large tumor in one eye and normal other eye. Similarly, diffuse tumor in one eye and the normal other eye, diffuse tumor in one eye with a small tumor. Now in either of the cases, when you have this normal fellow eye, then just do the enucleation. Normal fellow eye, just do the enucleation, right? But if I have a large tumor along with a small tumor in other eye also, in that case, okay, because both the eyes have already been involved, then that means I can do the chemotherapy, and the tumor which is still small, I can do the focal therapy. But in the other case where we have got a diffuse tumor and this eye is already gone, okay, then do the enucleation for that eye, and for the other eye tumor you can give the focal therapy, right? Now coming to the question number 8. Now this is a direct question. Indocyanine green angiography is most useful for. So you know mainly two kind of angiographies we have. We have got fundus fluorescein angiography and we have the ICG. So this FFA is mainly used for the retinal vasculature, while this ICGA is mainly used for the choroidal vasculature, and especially when this is occult. It is occult means it is lying in the sub-RPE space, then we are using this ICGA. So look at the options here. Occult choroidal neovascularization is correct. Classical के लिए we do the FFA only. Okay, angioid streaks with choroidal neovascularization or polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy. So answer to this question is the occult choroidal neovascularization whenever it is present in the sub-RPE space, then we are going to do this ICGA. Question number 9. The baby is premature who has taken birth at 29 weeks. Okay, on examination at 42 weeks. So baby was born at 29 weeks and we are doing the examination at 42 weeks, and baby is showing you ROP both eyes. Both eyes in stage 2 zone 1 plus disease. How will you manage this? So again, I had lot of queries in this question, but if you remember what I told you in the classes, that we are recommending the treatment for two categories. One is your threshold patients and one is your pre-threshold patients, right? So here they are not telling you about the threshold patient, they are concentrating on the pre-threshold patient. And if you remember, I told you 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 plus. You can easily remember the pre-threshold criteria with 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 plus. So 1 plus, then you have got 1. So this is 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 plus. This is your mnemonic. So when you are having zone 1 plus disease, any stage is a pre-threshold. Then zone 1 stage 3 even without your plus disease, and zone 2 stage 2 and you have plus disease, that is also pre-threshold. What is plus disease? Tortuous arteries and engorged veins. Remember, I had given you this mnemonic. Tortuous arteries and engorged veins. Tortuous arteries and engorged veins are all is called as your plus disease. Now look at the question here. They are saying the zone 1 plus. So this is already 1 plus. Any stage will do. Any stage, and they are saying both eyes, so obviously you have to do the laser photocoagulation of both the eyes. No question asked. You have to do the laser photocoagulation of both the eyes because both the eyes are involved here. Another important thing is what laser you are going to use. So the laser that we are using here is the diode laser. Diode laser is 810 nanometer. Now in the later stages, when the patient has developed the tractional RD, there we do the PPV, pars plana vitrectomy. We have already discussed the indications of the PPV there also. Now coming to the question number 10. All of the following are true with regard to malignant hypertension except malignant hypertension. What is malignant hypertension? Malignant hypertension means you have got stage 4 hypertension where we have the papilledema. Papilledema is always a marker of stage 4 hypertension or the malignant hypertension. The options are papilledema. So papilledema, obviously I told you, always papilledema is a marker of stage 4 hypertension, and you can have the sudden loss of vision, and I told you that papilledema is not the cause of sudden loss of vision. It can be due to the maculopathy. It can be due to the maculopathy. So sudden loss of vision can also be there. So this is not the answer. Number 3, the Elshing spots. What are Elshing spots? Now you might not be knowing what are Elshing spots, but again you can do this question by the diagnosis of exclusion. Look at the 4th option, the tractional RD. You don't get the tractional RD in hypertension. You get the exudative retinal detachment. Yes, so obviously the answer to this question is the tractional RD. Now as a extra edge, you can note down what are the Elshing spots. So these are actually the Elshing spots. These are the areas of the necrosis. Areas of the necrosis in the choriocapillaries. If you are getting the areas of necrosis in the choriocapillaries due to the high blood pressure, due to the very, very high blood pressure, these are actually called as the Elshing spots. Okay. Question number 11. Which of the following is true regarding the concentration of proteins in the senile cataract? So how do you get the proteins there? More soluble, less insoluble, more insoluble, less soluble, equal, or none of the above. So if there is actually a cataract, if there is a cataract, I should get the protein denaturation, right? I should get the protein denaturation, and obviously denaturation will occur when I have more of insoluble and less of soluble. So answer to this question is more of the insoluble proteins and less of the soluble, because if I have more soluble proteins, then this will not give me coagulation, this will not give me the pacification. So answer to this question will be B. Next question, question number 12. The infant is presenting with the bilateral white pupillary reflex. So you have to think about the DD of the leukocoria here. You have to think about the DD of the leukocoria. On slit lamp examination, you are getting a zone of opacity around the fetal nucleus. So if you have a lens here, then you have a fetal nucleus. Okay, they are showing the spoke-like radial opacities. So we have the spoke-like radial opacities around this fetal nucleus. So what is this? This is actually the riders. Riders are found in which cataract? The lamellar cataract. So answer to this question will be the lamellar or the zonular. It is also called as the zonular cataracts. Options are cataracta centralis purulenta, lamellar cataract, coronary cataract, or the posterior polar cataract. So answer to this question will be the lamellar cataract. Question number 13. A patient presents to the emergency department with the uniocular diplopia. So what can be the options that can lead to uniocular diplopia? That means either there is a scattering of the light, or the lens has shifted, due to which one area is a aphakic area and one area is your pseudophakic area. Examination shows a golden crescent, okay, with coaxial illumination in a dark crescent line. Which of the following is the most likely diagnosis? So if you do the examination, what they are trying to say, you are seeing this, and there you are seeing a apex, a dark crescent line. So this dark crescent line that you see, it is actually due to the subluxation of the lens. So lens has shifted upwards, so this area you will see as a dark crescent. Okay, now look at the option. One is a lenticonus. Lenticonus mein to you will see the conical protrusion of the lens. Okay, you won't see the dark crescent edge, so it is not there. Coloboma is the absence of the tissue. Okay na, so you will not get the diplopia. There will be no diplopia, uniocular diplopia not present in lenticonus, not in coloboma. Then C option is microspherophakia. This is your small plus spherical lens. Small plus spherical lens. So here also you are not going to get the uniocular diplopia. What is the fourth option? The ectopia lentis. So here you can have ectopia lentis, means the lens has subluxated from its place. So when the lens has subluxated from its place, one area will become aphakic, this area will be becoming aphakic, while this area is becoming the pseudophakic. This becomes pseudophakic. So obviously both of them will lead to the uniocular diplopia, and this, due to the subluxation of the lens, you are going to get this dark crescentic edge also. So answer to this question is ectopia lentis. Question number 14, which route of drug administration has been shown in the image? See, the detailed video I have already shared on my YouTube channel regarding the blocks. I think most of you must have gone through it. We have mainly two blocks. One is your retrobulbar block and the peribulbar block. Okay, so I won't go into much details again because I have already done one video. You can refer to that. Okay, so what you are doing, they are showing two needles. So first of all, two needles are always there in the peribulbar block. In the retrobulbar block, you are giving only in this area, inside this muscle cone you are giving. So there you are giving just one block. So here can you see, we are giving in the peribulbar space in the outer area. This is your cone, so this is your upper peribulbar space and this is your lower peribulbar space. So obviously this is a case of peribulbar block, not the retrobulbar block. Upper block is given, okay, medially, medial 1/3 and lateral 2/3, while the lower one, L for L, lower is given on the lateral side. So that is given at the junction of the lateral 1/3 and the medial 2/3. Okay, so answer to this question is the peribulbar block. Next, question number 15. IOL power was calculated to be plus 22 diopter for a planned cataract surgery with PC IOL implantation. Power was 22, but they placed a IOL of 20 diopters in the capsular bag due to certain unforeseen circumstances. So what will be the refractive status? Now this is again a very simple question. There is no point of astigmatism here. Okay, the thing is that you have done the under correction. We have done the under correction. So what is happening? Instead of plus 22, because what happens in the aphakia? Aphakia is a condition of hypermetropia, and you are doing the under correction of hypermetropia for plus 22 diopters. You are giving just plus 20. So there will be, you know, uncorrected, therefore there will be some amount of uncorrected hypermetropia in this patient. So answer to this question will be hypermetropia. Is that very clear? Question number 16. There is a neonate who is presenting with the leukocoria and convulsions. Okay, on examination there is failure to thrive, diarrhea, vomiting and mental retardation, hepatosplenomegaly, fever is also present. So what is not useful? So this is a typical question. I have discussed this so many times. This was also asked. A similar question also came in JIPMER 2020 paper. Okay, here you are thinking about a neonate who is presenting with leukocoria and convulsions. So this is actually a case of cataract with the convulsions. So if a neonate is coming with cataract and convulsions, basically we think of two things. One is the galactosemia. For the galactosemia, you will have to see the urine assay for the reducing substances. The second thing can be the toxoplasmosis. For the toxoplasmosis, you know, we require a triad. This triad consists of the hydrocephalus. One is your hydrocephalus. Then you have got chorioretinitis, and we have intracranial calcification. So we do not have the triad, but though they are giving you some history of fever, so we can think of the TORCH group of infections, but it is actually not toxoplasmosis looks like, because they haven't told you about the triad, but you can think about it because fever history is present. So you will do for the toxoplasmosis, fever history is present, we will do the serology for the titers of antibodies, right? Then screening for amino acids in the urine. Now you can also think of the Low's syndrome. What is this Low's syndrome? Though it's not very common, but it can also present in a similar way. Low's syndrome mein what is happening? It is your oculocerebrocolonic renal syndrome. Oculocerebrorenal syndrome is there. So this oculo may there can be cataract, and cerebro may there can be convulsion. So this patient can also present with cataract and convulsions, for which we are doing the screening of amino acids. So we have to do the titers of the antibodies, also amino acids in urine, as well as the reducing substances. So answer to this question is serum biochemistry for calcium and phosphorus. Now I got so many messages that ma'am, hypocalcemia can also cause convulsions and cataract. Yes, but are you getting any evidence of that in this question? You have to see according to the question. They are asking which is least useful or not useful. Okay. So that will be the last thing that I'll do. I am not getting any other symptom or sign of hypocalcemia or hypophosphatemia. That is why that will be least preferred option. So definitely I am going to do the antibodies because there was a fever history. Definitely because of the convulsions, I'll do the antibodies for amino acids in the urine, and it is most probably a case of galactosemia because you are getting the systemic features, failure to thrive, diarrhea, vomiting. So these are all the features of galactose intolerance. So obviously you are going to do further urine assay for the presence of reducing substances. So your answer is D. Question number 17. Identify the type of the lens. So this is again a very easy question, common sense. Can you look at this IOL? So it is very clear that this IOL is in front of the iris. This is your iris and this IOL is present in front. So obviously this is therefore ASC IOL. The normal IOLs that you see, you are not able to see it anterior to the iris. So those are your PC IOLs. But this IOL is seen anterior to the iris. So that is why it is ASC IOL, right? So nothing to be panicky about. This is just a AC IOL because you are able to see it anterior to the iris. And don't start following the IOLs, looking at so many pictures, because only very basic things would be asked in AC IOL and PC IOL, because beyond that it is going in the PG scope. Okay. Question number 18. Tonometry, which is used in a patient with the irregular surface of the cornea. So this question where you are required to do the tonometry with the irregular surface of the cornea. This is actually the tonometer called as the Mackay-Mark tonometer. Mackay-Mark tonometer. Rebound tonometer is actually used in the children. This is mainly used in the children or for the self-recording and no anesthesia is actually required here. Okay, while it is the Mackay-Mark tonometer which is used in cases of the what you call as irregular, if you have the irregular cornea or we have the scarred cornea. Whenever we have the irregular cornea or the scarred cornea, then for those cases we are using this Mackay-Mark tonometer. We also have a handheld tonometer. The handheld tonometer of this Mackay-Mark, which is applying the same principle, that is called as the tono pen. So tono pens are actually used for the handheld tonometer in the cams. If you are using, then we are using the tono pens. Question number 19. A 75-year-old patient presenting with the deterioration of vision on examination, pupillary reflexes sluggish, IOP normal, optic disc shows a large and deep cup along with the paracentral scotomas. So this patient, 75 years male, is coming with the diminution of vision. Okay, pupillary reflexes are sluggish, IOP normal. Okay, we have got cupping, so we have optic disc changes, right, along with the scotomas. So we also have the visual field defects here. So do you remember, this is just I explained you in the triad, when you do not have the raised intraocular pressure but you have optic disc changes and the visual field defect. So I can call it as glaucoma, but this will be normal tension glaucoma or the low tension glaucoma. So if you look at the options, the primary narrow angle. So narrow angle to hai hi nahi, it is showing you cupping, and narrow angle glaucoma will not show you cup, because you know that is mostly acute. So this is not a case of narrow angle glaucoma. Normal tension glaucoma, yes, it could be a case of normal tension glaucoma, also called as a low tension glaucoma. Neovascular glaucoma, no evidence of neovascularization. It is not a absolute glaucoma. Absolute glaucoma is again the end stage of angle closure glaucoma. So your answer is the normal tension glaucoma. Question number 20, a patient having glaucoma comes with a blepharoconjunctivitis after instilling some anti-glaucoma drug. Which of the following drug can be responsible? So which drug has a side effect which can cause the allergic blepharoconjunctivitis? So it is actually your beta blockers. We know that beta blockers are known to cause this. So let's see here. We have timolol, latanoprost, dipivifrine and pilocarpine. So timolol is a beta blocker. This is your prostaglandin analog. Dipivifrine is the alpha adrenergic analog, and pilocarpine is a miotic. So answer to this question is the timolol. Moreover, if you remember, I told you to learn these side effects with A, B, C, D. A for allergic blepharoconjunctivitis, B for blurred vision. We can get the blurred vision. C for decreased corneal sensations. We can have decreased corneal sensations. And D for the dryness we can get. And also there was SPK, superficial punctate keratitis, also can be there. Question number 21, drug used in the Luminate program. So what is the drug used in the Luminate program for the non-infectious uveitis? Actually, what is Luminate? It is actually a trial. This is your Lux uveitis multi-center program. This question was once asked in the AIIMS in a new approach for the treatment. So this was actually Lux Luminate program. There the full form was the Lux uveitis multi-center program in a new approach for the treatment of the non-infectious uveitis, and the drug they used was the voclosporin. So don't go in much details, just remember this much, because AIIMS people are in a habit of asking something new. So at that time when they asked, this was a new research that was going on, that's why they did ask this. Okay. Question number 22, primary use. What is the primary objective of the use of atropine in the anterior uveitis? So this we have discussed in detail, that anterior uveitis give you the ciliary muscle spasm, and due to this ciliary muscle spasm, what we are giving? We are giving the mydriatics and cycloplegics. So our basic aim behind giving this mydriatics and cycloplegics is giving relief of ciliary muscle spasm. Apart from that, it is preventing the synecdoche, it is breaking the synecdoche, it is decreasing the vascular permeability, it is improving the blood supply. But the basic thing is the rest to the ciliary muscle, giving relief to the ciliary muscle. That is very, very important. The primary use is this only. It increases the supply of antibodies, increasing the blood flow. I told you it prevents the posterior synecdoche. All are uses, but the first use is giving rest to the ciliary muscle spasm. Question number 23, a 55-year-old diabetic patient is there, and this diabetic patient is coming with the complaint of unilateral transient obscuration for 2 to 3 days and followed by sudden diminution of vision. Which of the following test you will order? Now what you are going to do? See, whenever you have this transient obscuration of vision in a diabetic person, what you are going to think? Transient obscuration in a diabetic person, always think about the vascular occlusions. So we always think about the vascular occlusion, and this vascular occlusion can be CRAO or it can be CRVO. Now what is more common? CRAO is more common, and this is associated with the increased levels of the homocysteine. Therefore the answer to your question will be, you have to look for the homocysteine levels. This could very well be the answer, because it has been seen that those patients who have increased levels of homocysteine can be presenting as the CRAO, and therefore there will be sudden diminution of vision. So therefore the answer to this question is the serum homocysteine levels. Next question, number 24. Multifocal ERG. Multifocal ERG is useful to assess the function of the rods, the macular cones, the ganglionic cells, or the retinal pigment epithelium. Now, what is the function of this multifocal ERG? If you look at this ERG has got A wave, then B wave, and it has C wave. So mainly what is the function of this multifocal ERG? It is for seeing the function of the macular cones, not only the cones which are, especially the cones which are located in the macula. Question number 25. Which of the following conditions has autosomal dominant inheritance? So, you know, I have already told you that this best disease shows you autosomal dominant inheritance when we discussed about the macular dystrophy. When we discussed about the macular dystrophy, you know, one was your best disease, this is autosomal dominant, and one was your Stargardt disease. The Stargardt disease is autosomal recessive. Okay. So you don't have to learn each and every, but you'll get only the important ones, and plus the genetic inheritance, you will come to know of so many systemic diseases from your systemic pathology and medicine also. So I won't say that learn every genetic inheritance from ophthalmology. Those of which are important I have already given to you, and you can solve most of the questions from that information only. So that's all for this part 1. We have solved the 25 questions. We'll be seeing you in the other part, that is part 2, for remaining questions. Thank you.